Some secrets don't wait to be found. They pull people toward them, the way a loose thread pulls at a sweater until the whole thing comes undone. This is one of those stories. It starts with a girl who smiled too wide and a letter no one was supposed to read. It ends somewhere none of them expected. And in the middle, there's a man who did his job exactly the way he was trained to and was never the same again. Marcus Webb had been working the night shift at Greystone Residential Care for 11 years. 11 years of quiet hallways, cold coffee, and the particular kind of silence that only exists in places where people have stopped expecting things to change. He had the walk of a man who had learned to move without disturbing the air around him. Soft shoes, steady breath, eyes that move the same way every night. Left wall, right wall, door 1, door 2, door 3, like a metronome that never lost its beat. He was not an unkind man. The residents knew this. The ones who could still speak would sometimes call out for him by name in the middle of the night, not because they needed anything, just because his name in their mouth felt like something solid. Marcus, a word that meant he was there. He answered every time. Room 12 belonged to Charlotte. She had arrived at Greystone 4 years ago, transferred from a hospital 2 counties over, and nobody on staff had known quite what to make of her at first. She was 63 years old, which was young for this floor. She moved carefully, the way people move when they have learned that the body is not entirely trustworthy anymore. But her eyes were sharp, the kind of sharp that made new nurses stop mid-sentence and recalibrate whatever they had been about to say. She didn't talk much about before. Staff notes from her first month mentioned that she deflected personal questions with a particular skill. Not rudely, not in a way that made you feel shut out, but in a way that made you feel like you had simply asked the wrong question, and she was graciously letting you try again. Nobody ever quite got to the right question. What they knew was this. She had no family who visited. She received no phone calls. Her emergency contact form had a name on it, a woman named Diane, and a phone number with a disconnected tone that the front desk had stopped trying after the first year. She had a small wooden box on her nightstand that she never opened in front of anyone. She liked the window left cracked 2 inches, even in winter. She ate everything on her plate and thanked whoever brought it every single time, as though it was the first time anyone had ever done something kind for her. Marcus noticed things. That was the job, and he was good at it. He noticed that Charlotte slept on her right side. He noticed that she kept her left hand curled under her pillow, even in sleep, like she was holding something. He noticed that some mornings she was fine, and some mornings she was somewhere else entirely, her body in the bed and her mind somewhere decades back, walking around in a life she didn't talk about. He had never looked under the pillow. That was not a line he would cross. In 11 years, he had never searched a resident's personal space beyond what safety protocol required. These people had lost so much, their homes, their routines, the quiet dignity of choosing what to eat for breakfast. The least he could give them was the small privacy of whatever they kept close. The night he found the envelope was not like the other nights. It was a Tuesday in February, the kind of cold that gets into the building through the walls, not the doors. Marcus was doing his 2 a.m. round, and when he came to room 12, something was wrong before he even opened the door. He knew it the way he knew things in that building. Not from logic, from years of paying attention to sounds that weren't quite sounds and stillness that wasn't quite still. He pushed the door open. Charlotte was on the floor beside her bed. Not fallen hard. It looked like she had slid slowly, the way a person goes down when their body makes a quiet decision without telling them. She was conscious, breathing. Her eyes were open and tracking him when he came through the door, and the first thing she said, before he could say anything at all, was, "Don't call anyone yet." He called anyway. That was protocol. But he stayed with her while he did it, one hand on her arm, talking to her in the low, steady voice he used for 2 a.m. and nothing good. She gripped his wrist while the night nurse came, while the vitals got checked, while the fuss and bustle of mild emergency filled the small room. In all of it, the pillow fell off the bed. The black envelope landed on the floor between them, and Charlotte saw it the same moment he did, and something moved across her face that he had never seen there before. Not fear, not embarrassment, something older than both of those things. She looked at the envelope the way you look at something you've been carrying so long you forgot it had weight. "Pick it up," she said. He did. "Keep it." He didn't understand. He held it. It was sealed. On the front, in handwriting that pressed hard into the paper like every word was being driven home by force, was written one line. "For whoever finds this when I'm gone." Asterisk, he looked at her. She had already looked away, back at the ceiling, her jaw set in the particular way of people who have said the thing they needed to say and are done with the saying of it. The nurse was asking her questions. Someone was bringing a wheelchair. The room filled up and then emptied again, and Charlotte was moved to observation for the night, and Marcus was left standing in room 12 with a black envelope in his hand, and feeling in his chest like something had just shifted tectonic and slow under everything he thought he understood about this place. He did not open it that night. He put it in his jacket pocket and finished his rounds, and the envelope was there the whole time like a stone he couldn't stop feeling. He checked on her twice more before his shift ended. She was stable. She was sleeping. Her left hand was curled under the hospital pillow, like it was still holding something that wasn't there anymore. He drove home in the gray pre-dawn with the envelope on the passenger seat. His apartment was quiet in the way his apartment was always quiet, a specific, managed emptiness that he had arranged carefully over the years. He made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table. He set the envelope in front of him. "For whoever finds this when I'm gone." Asterisk, he was not gone. She was not gone. He left it sealed. What he did instead was call his supervisor, a woman named Patricia who had been at Greystone longer than anyone, and who responded to unusual situations the way a lighthouse responds to ships, steadily, without drama, with the singular purpose of helping something navigate. He told her what had happened. He told her about the envelope. He read her the words on the front. Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Don't open it," she said. "Bring it in. I'll be there at 7. He was there at 6:45. He hadn't slept. The envelope sat on Patricia's desk, between them when she arrived, and she looked at it the way he had looked at it, with the particular attention you give to something you already know is going to change the shape of the day. "She asked you to keep it," Patricia said. "She said keep it. She didn't say open it." "No." They looked at it together. Outside the window, the February sky was doing something complicated with the light, going from gray to a thin and unconvincing gold. "We need to know if there's something in there that affects your care," Patricia said finally. That was the professional answer. The right answer. The answer that gave them permission to do what they were already going to have to do. Patricia picked up the envelope. She turned it over. She held it for a moment like she was taking its temperature. Then she opened it. What was inside was not what either of them expected. It was not a will. It was not a goodbye letter in the way they had braced for, that particular kind of document that lands on institutional desks and has to be filed and followed up and handed to social workers who carry it forward in manila folders. It was not a list of instructions or a final request or anything that could be easily categorized and processed and moved through the system. It was a letter, handwritten, 12 pages front and back, the paper soft with age at the folds. It began with a date, 31 years ago, and a name. Not Charlotte's name, a child's name. Patricia read the first page and stopped. She set the letter down on her desk and pressed her fingers flat against it like she was trying to keep it from moving. Marcus watched her face do the thing faces do when something large is being absorbed. The small collapse around the eyes, the breath that goes in and doesn't fully come back out. "Go get Charlotte," she said. "She's cleared to return to her room." "What is it?" Patricia looked at him. In 11 years, he had never seen her look uncertain. She looked uncertain now. "It's a confession," she said. Outside, the February light had decided to commit. It came through the window hard and yellow and fell across the letter in a way that made the handwriting look almost luminous, the pressed hard words standing up off the page like they'd been waiting a very long time to be read by someone who would understand what they cost. Marcus went to get Charlotte. She was sitting in the observation room with her hands in her lap and her eyes on the door, and when he came through it, she looked at him with that sharp-eyed steadiness of hers, and he understood for the first time that she had been waiting. Not just this morning. For a long time. For whatever happened next after the envelope was found, she had been quietly, patiently waiting for it to begin. He held the door open. She stood. She walked past him without speaking. Her left hand, free now, swung at her side. They walked down the hall together, and neither of them said anything, and the morning light came through every window they passed and lit them in pieces, shoulder, arm, hand gone, all the way back to room 12, where Patricia was waiting with 12 pages of 30-year-old handwriting and the particular silence of something that has finally, after a very long time, been allowed to be heard. The letter smelled like cedar and old paper. Patricia noticed this before she noticed anything else, that whoever had stored it had wrapped it in something careful, something that said this matters, keep it safe, which told its own story before a single word was read. Charlotte sat in the chair by the window, not the bed. The chair was deliberate, the posture of someone who intended to be awake for what came next. She folded her hands in her lap, and she looked at Patricia, and Patricia looked at her, and Marcus stood near the door in the particular way of people who belong in a room, but aren't sure they should say so. You know what's in it, Patricia said. It wasn't a question. I wrote it, Charlotte said. She said it the same way she thanked the kitchen staff for her meals. Plain, without drama. The statement of a fact she had been sitting with so long it had worn smooth. Patricia set the letter on the table beside Charlotte's chair, and Charlotte looked at it. And for a moment the room was the quietest room Marcus had ever stood in. Quieter than the hallways at 3 a.m., quieter than the minutes after a resident stopped breathing. The kind of quiet that has mass. Do you want to tell us? Patricia said carefully. Or do you want us to read it? Charlotte looked at the window. The February light was still doing its thin gold thing, and outside a sparrow was sitting on a ledge doing absolutely nothing with the focused commitment of a creature who has mastered the art of simply being present. Charlotte watched it for a moment. Both, she said. Her name had not always been Charlotte. That was the first thing. She said it plainly, without ceremony, and waited for the weight of it to land. It landed. Marcus felt it land. Patricia had gone very still in the way Patricia went still when she was listening with everything she had. The name she was born with was Eleanor Marsh. She had been Eleanor Marsh until she was 32 years old, and then she had spent the next 31 years being Charlotte Webb, a name she had chosen from a phone book, two first names pressed together, belonging to nobody, costing nothing. She had changed her name because of child, not to protect herself from the child, to protect the child from her. This was the part that required the careful telling. She told it without rushing, and Patricia did not interrupt, and Marcus did not move from his place near the door. The sparrow outside remained committed to its ledge. 31 years ago, Eleanor Marsh had been a social worker in a mid-sized city in Ohio. She had been good at her job in the way that people are good at jobs they chose because they needed to fix something in themselves and found midway through that the fixing wasn't going to be possible. She had a caseload. She had paperwork. She had a supervisor who was stretched too thin and a system that was stretched thinner. She had a little girl named Maya. Maya was 7 years old, and she had been on Eleanor's caseload for 14 months, and Eleanor had visited the home 11 times and filed 3 reports and escalated twice and been told both times that the evidence was not sufficient for removal, that the family was cooperating with services, that the children were not in imminent danger. On a Thursday in November, Eleanor had a court appearance for a different case. She had been scheduled to visit Maya's home that Thursday. She had rescheduled. She had told herself she would go Friday. On Friday morning, she got the call. Maya had been taken to the hospital Wednesday night. She had been there for 36 hours before anyone notified the caseworker. By the time Eleanor got to the hospital, Maya had already been moved to intensive care, and by the time Eleanor got through the doors of intensive care, Maya was already. The word Eleanor used was already, and she let it stand alone, and Patricia's eyes closed briefly, and Marcus understood, already past the place where any of it mattered. Eleanor Marsh had stood in a hospital hallway in Ohio and understood, with the cold and specific clarity of a person in shock, that she had rescheduled a Thursday visit. The investigation that followed cleared her of professional negligence. The language of the report used phrases like systemic failures and resource limitations and documentation incompliance. Her supervisor signed off. Her caseload was redistributed temporarily while she took leave. She was offered counseling. She went back to work for 4 months. Then she walked out of her office on a Wednesday afternoon, drove to a gas station 2 miles away, and called in a resignation from payphone. She left her car. She took a bus to a city she had never been to. She went to the DMV with a birth certificate she had obtained in a way she described only as a thing I'm not proud of and won't detail. And she did not say this with shame. She said it with the flat precision of someone reporting facts. And she became Charlotte Webb. She had been Charlotte Webb ever since. The letter was not addressed to the institution. It was not addressed to authorities. It was addressed in the pressed hard handwriting that leaned forward on the page like it was trying to get somewhere, to Maya's mother. Not to apologize. Charlotte was precise about this, and her precision on the point had the quality of something she had argued out with herself many times over many years. She was not writing to apologize, because an apology implied that words could do something to the weight of what had happened, and she did not believe they could, and she did not think it would be honest to pretend otherwise. She was writing to say that she had not forgotten. That was the whole letter. 12 pages to say one thing. She had not forgotten Maya. She had not moved past it or processed it or arrived at acceptance or found peace. She had carried it specifically and deliberately because she believed that someone should, because the system that had cleared her of negligence had also cleared itself, and the supervisor had retired with a pension, and the documentation was in compliance, and Maya was 7 years old, and she had been on Eleanor's caseload for 14 months, and Eleanor had rescheduled a Thursday visit. She had written the letter because she was 63 years old, and her body was making decisions she hadn't authorized, and she understood that eventually there would be a Thursday she didn't wake up from, and she needed there to be a record somewhere in someone's hands that said, a child named Maya existed, and I knew her, and I failed her, and I have not pretended otherwise for 31 years. She had kept it under her pillow because she did not trust boxes or drawers or any container that could be emptied without ceremony. The pillow was where she slept. The letter was where she kept what she could not put down. The room held all of this. Outside, the sparrow had been joined by another sparrow. They sat on a ledge together, doing their focused nothing, and the light was shifting now toward mid-morning, going from thin gold to something more committed and clear. Patricia picked up the letter. She turned to the last page. She read the final paragraph, and her face did the thing it had done before. That small collapse, that breath that doesn't fully return. She set it back down. The mother, Patricia, said, Diane. Charlotte looked at her. The disconnected number, Marcus said from the door. Charlotte nodded. She had been trying to reach Diane for 4 years. The number had never worked. She did not know if Diane was alive. She did not know if Diane would want this letter, would want any piece of it, would want to hear the name Eleanor Marsh spoken by anyone ever again, or if she would rather every trace of that time be allowed to sink into silence. She did not know, but she had tried to find her, in the way available to a woman who had no internet and no phone and no last name she could use officially, through the front desk calls they made on her behalf before the line disconnected, through a request to a social worker who had visited once and never returned, through the letter itself, addressed and sealed and kept close, waiting for the kind of luck that comes not from searching, but from finally stopping fighting the fact that some things don't get resolved by effort alone. There's something else, Charlotte said. Marcus and Patricia both looked at her. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan, the gray one she wore on Tuesdays, and she placed on the table beside the letter a photograph. Worn at the edges, the color faded to the particular warmth of photographs from that era, all soft yellows and muted reds. A little girl with braids, sitting on a porch step, looking at something off to the left of the camera with the concentrated interest of a child who has found something worth looking at. She was smiling, not at the camera, at whatever it was, I took this on the third visit, Charlotte said. I wasn't supposed to keep it. It was from the case file. When I left, I took it with me. She looked at the photograph with the same expression she had used for the envelope on the floor of her room. That recognition of weight, long carried. She deserved to be remembered by someone who chose to remember her, Charlotte said. Not just filed. Patricia sat down. This was notable because Patricia did not sit during difficult conversations. She stood. Standing was how she held the shape of things, kept them manageable, maintained the professional architecture of a hard situation. She sat down. Marcus thought about his 2 a.m. rounds. He thought about the hallway, the cold coffee, the left wall, right wall, door 1, door 2 pattern of 11 years of nights. He thought about Charlotte's hand under the pillow, curved around something, all those nights, all those thousands of nights. The weight in his chest from the night before was still there. It had not shifted. It had settled. The way things settle when they stop being uncertain and become simply heavy. Patricia looked at the photograph. She looked at the letter. She looked at Charlotte sitting in her chair by the window, upright, hands folded, having said the thing that needed to be said in the plain voice she used for all the facts of her life. What do you want us to do? Patricia asked. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. The sparrows on the ledge outside held their positions. The mid-morning light had gone full and honest across the room, touching everything. Find her, Charlotte said. Find Diane. Give her the letter and the photograph and tell her that her daughter was seen. She paused. That's all. I'm not asking for anything back. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I've earned a right to ask for that. I just need her to know that somewhere, for 31 years, someone was still paying attention. Nobody said anything for a while. Then, Patricia picked up the photograph. She held it carefully, the way you hold things that belong to someone else's grief. The little girl in the picture smiled at her off-camera thing, unconcerned with any of them, bright-eyed and mid-discovery, permanently 7, permanently interested in whatever it was she was looking at on that porch. We'll try, Patricia said. It was not a promise of success. Patricia was too honest for promises she couldn't keep. But it was a commitment, and Charlotte heard it as one, and something in her posture changed. Not a loosening, exactly. More like a person who has been standing braced against something and has been told for the first time in a very long time that they don't have to hold it alone anymore. Outside, one of the sparrows flew away. The other stayed on the ledge, alone now, still doing its focused nothing in the winter light. Marcus watched Charlotte reach out and place her left hand, flat and open, over the photograph. Not gripping, just present. He left the room quietly, the way he had learned to leave rooms, and walked back down the hallway he had walked 1,000 times, and the building felt different around him in a way he couldn't name and didn't try to. It took Patricia 6 days to find Diane, not through official channels. Those doors had been closed a long time, and Patricia had lived long enough in institutional spaces to know which doors were closed for bureaucratic reasons and which were closed for human ones. She found Diane through a woman named Carol at a church in Youngstown who ran a grief support group that had been meeting in the same basement for 22 years. Carol knew everyone. Carol had known Diane when Diane had come to the group years back, and Carol knew where Diane had moved when she left, and Carol gave Patricia a phone number with the particular gravity of someone who understood without being told that the call was going to matter. Patricia made the call from her office, alone, door closed, on a Thursday. She did not tell Marcus what was said. She told him only that there had been a long silence on the line, and then a short conversation, and that Diane had said she needed time, and that time was the only right answer Diane could have given, and so Patricia was giving it to her. Marcus went back to his nights. He noticed that Charlotte slept differently now, still on her right side, still with her left hand curled under the pillow, but the curl was looser. Not holding, just resting. He noticed this on his 2 a.m. rounds the way he noticed all the things that didn't announce themselves but changed the quality of a room. He noted it in the same internal ledger he kept for all the small, significant things in that building that would never appear in any official record. He didn't mention it to Charlotte. She didn't mention it to him. They had a particular understanding now, built from that February night and everything that had come out of it that didn't require words to maintain. She thanked him for her breakfast tray. He asked if the window was at the right 2 inches. They moved through the ordinary mechanics of care with the quiet respect of two people who have seen something real in each other and chosen not to make it into something it didn't need to be. 12 days after Patricia made the phone call, Diane came. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon in the particular way of someone who has made a decision and gotten there before they could talk themselves out of it. A little fast, a little breathless, wearing a blue coat that looked like it was from another decade, carrying a bag close to her body. She gave her name at the front desk with the tight jaw of someone doing a hard thing in public and needing it to be businesslike or it wouldn't get done. Marcus was on a day shift that week, covering for someone. He was at the desk when she came in. He looked at her and knew before she said her name, because grief that old has a specific quality, something in the way it sits in the body, and Diane carried it in the set of her shoulders and the careful control of her face in the way of someone who had been carrying it long enough to know exactly how much of it they could show before it showed them. He called Patricia. He offered Diane a seat, and she didn't take it, preferring to stand near the window with her bag held against her chest. Patricia came out. They spoke in low voices. Patricia brought her to a small meeting room. Not Charlotte's room. Not yet. Somewhere neutral. The space between where you've been and where you're going. Marcus stood at the desk and did his job. He found out what happened in that meeting room in pieces over the weeks that followed, the way you find out things in institutions. Not from one person's account, but from the aggregate of small details that accumulate until they form something approaching a picture. Patricia had given Diane the letter first, without context, just the letter in its black envelope, set on the table in front of her. Diane had looked at it for a long time without touching it. Then she had picked it up and read it at the table while Patricia sat across from her and said nothing because there was nothing to say, and Patricia understood this. She read all 12 pages. She read slowly. She did not cry. Not there. Her face was the face of someone for whom this particular grief had happened so long ago and so thoroughly that it had changed from sharp to structural. It was the thing she was built around now, not something that could be added to or taken from. When she finished, she set the letter down and asked one question. She asked if the woman who wrote it was still alive. Patricia said yes. Diane sat with that for a moment. Then Patricia placed the photograph on the table. Diane looked at the photograph of her daughter sitting on the porch step, smiling at something off to the left of the camera, braids neat, completely absorbed in whatever small thing had caught her interest, and the structural grief shifted. Just for a moment. It cracked at one specific place, and something came through the crack that was different from everything else, older than grief under it, the original layer, and Diane put both hands flat on the photograph and pressed it to the table and made a sound that Patricia would describe later and only once as the sound of someone setting something down that they had been carrying for a very long time and had stopped believing they would ever be allowed to put down. They stayed in that room for a long time. Marcus walked his halls, checked his doors, made his coffee. The afternoon light in the building did its slow rotation, moving from window to window, room to room. Charlotte did not know Diane was there. Not yet. Patricia had asked Diane if she wanted to meet her. This was the question she had not been able to plan around, the one that had no right answer predetermined, the one that Diane had to build her answer to from whatever she had available. Diane had been quiet for several minutes. Outside the meeting room window, the parking lot sat flat and gray and businesslike, and a car alarm went off in the distance and stopped. She had said, "I don't know if I can be in the same room as her." Patricia had said, "That's an honest answer." She had said, "I don't know if I want to." Patricia had said, "Those are different questions." Another silence. Diane's hands still flat on the photograph. She had said, "What does she want from it?" Patricia told her exactly what Charlotte had said, word for word, the way she had memorized it because she knew this question was coming. Asterisk, give her the letter and the photograph and tell her that her daughter was seen. I'm not asking for anything back. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Asterisk, Diane had looked at the photograph again. Then she had said, "Take me to her." Marcus was not in the hallway when it happened. He was at the other end of the building. but a nurse named Sonia was, and Sonia told him later, in the careful way of someone reporting something they hadn't been prepared for. Patricia had walked Diane to room 12 and knocked. Charlotte had said, "Come in." Patricia had opened the door and stepped aside, and Diane had stood in the doorway. And Charlotte had looked at her, and the sharp-eyed steadiness that she wore as standard equipment had simply gone. Not broken. Gone. Like a light switched off, replaced by something with no name Sonia could locate. Charlotte's face went to a place it had not been in 31 years. She did not say anything. Diane did not say anything. Patricia stood in the hall, and Sonia stood further down the hall, and both of them understood, with the particular intelligence of people who witness the private moments of other people's lives as a professional matter, that what was happening in room 12 was not something that could be helped or managed or guided. It was two people standing in the specific gravity of a shared catastrophe, and whatever happened next was between them alone. Patricia pulled the door halfway closed. They left them to it. What happened inside room 12 on that Saturday afternoon in February, Marcus was never told, and he never asked. That felt right to him. Some rooms you tend, and some rooms you leave. He had learned this in 11 years of nights, and it was among the truest things he knew. What he knew was what came after. Diane came back the following Saturday, and the Saturday after that. She came in a blue coat, and then in a different coat when the weather shifted, and she came with the particular walk of someone who had given themselves permission to keep arriving. She and Charlotte met in the room with the window cracked 2 inches, and sometimes a nurse passing the door heard talking, and sometimes heard nothing at all. Charlotte started leaving her left hand above the pillow when she slept. Marcus noticed this on his 2 a.m. round, 7 weeks after the night she had fallen. Her hand was open on top of the pillow, palm up, fingers loosely curled. Not holding anything, not braced around anything, just there in the open air of the room, free. He stood in the doorway for a moment. She was sleeping deeply, the kind of sleep that doesn't defend itself. He did his check and moved on. In April, Charlotte asked Marcus to sit with her for a while after his shift ended. It was the first time she had asked anything like this in 4 years, and he said yes the way he said yes to things that were clearly the right answer, which was without deliberating. She told him about Eleanor Marsh. Not the confession version, not the institutional version. The full version, the one that included being 27 and believing she could fix the things that needed fixing, and being 32 and understanding she couldn't, and every year in between. She told it like someone reading from a long document they had memorized through repetition, a document they had gone over so many times the words had worn down to their essential shapes. He listened. That was all. He had learned in 11 years that listening was the thing that cost the most and gave the most back, and that most people did not do it well because they were always partly using the listening time to prepare what they were going to say next. He just listened. When she was done, she looked at the window. "I don't know if it helped her," she said. "Diane, I don't know if she needed this or if I needed this," and I told myself she did. Marcus thought about this. "Could be both," he said. Charlotte looked at him. The sharpness in her eyes was still there, but there was something behind it now that he hadn't seen before, or maybe had not been there before, or maybe had been there all along, and he had only learned to see it now. "Could be both," she agreed. Outside the window, the April light was doing something extravagant after the long gray of the winter, spilling across the parking lot, and the lawn, and the small scrubby trees along the fence with the reckless energy of a thing that has been waiting a long time to be allowed to be bright. A sparrow landed on the ledge and looked in and flew off again. Charlotte watched it go. "Do you know what I thought about," she said, "when I was lying on the floor that night? Before you came in." He waited. "I thought about whether the letter would be found," she said. "Whether someone would know what to do with it." She paused. I was afraid the answer was no. He thought about the envelope in his pocket, the whole long night, the cold passenger seat, the kitchen table, and the coffee going cold. "It got found," he said. "It got found," she said. That was the whole conversation. He left a little while later, and the day shift nurse came in, and Charlotte ate her dinner and thanked the kitchen staff, And Marcus drove home in the spring evening with the windows down and the air coming through warm and new smelling, the way air comes through in April when it has finally made good on its promises. He did not know what Eleanor Marsh had been looking for when she became Charlotte Webb. He did not know if she had found it, or if he could find something like that, or if the best you could do was set it down in a place where someone else could pick it up and carry it forward. He thought about Maya, 7 years old, on a porch step, looking at something off to the left of the camera with the focused interest of a child who has found something worth her attention. Seen. He thought about that word for the whole drive home, the way Charlotte had used it, not remembered in the way of monuments and dedications and formal commemorations, seen in the simple daily way, the way you see a thing when you choose to keep looking at it, even when looking is hard. The way a person with a letter under her pillow kept looking for 31 years in the middle of the night, with her left hand curled around the fact of a child who deserved better. The evening traffic moved around him easy and ordinary. Marcus Webb drove home, and the city did what cities do, kept going, lights coming on in windows, people moving in and out of their lives, and somewhere in a residential care facility, a woman named Charlotte slept on her right side with her left hand open on top of the pillow, and somewhere across town, a woman named Diane was sitting with whatever Saturday afternoons in February had become for her now, and a letter that had spent 31 years sealed in a black envelope was sitting on someone's table in the open air, read. Not resolved, not forgiven, not wrapped up into the kind of ending that asks you to feel settled about it, but seen, which was, in the end, the only thing that had ever been asked for, and the only thing it turned out that had ever been possible, and enough.